What happens next with Iran? With this whole tension, with they've said that there's this ceasefire, but it doesn't look like a great ceasefire.
There's a crisis of legitimacy that this current Islamic government has to reckon with domestically. They have to now look at their people and say, okay, we basically failed to defend you. They're trying to spin that narrative, saying that they did defend the homeland, and they're trying to use nationalism as a sort of a salve, as a treatment to justify or to explain or to sort of wash over what happened. There's going to be new leaders. The supreme leader right now is frail. He's been frail. He's been on the verge of death for years now, setting aside attempts to kill him. And the crisis of succession, who comes next, is going to be now amplified much more, a greater sense of urgency. And then whether or not the next leaders of the Revolutionary Guard, which is sort of Iran's. So just to explain something, Iran has two militaries. There's the Iranian military that protects its borders and domestic security, oddly enough. And then there's the IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, which is protecting the revolution. The R in IRGC stands for revolution. The I does not stand for Iran, it stands for Islamic. In other words, they are protecting what happened in 79. They are not interested in the country. That's what the army does. The army protects the country. The IRGC protects the movement. And so the IRGC is the most powerful entity in Iran. And who their next generation of leaders or next level of leaders that rise up, what their views are they willing to cooperate with the rest? Are they going to double down on nuclear enrichment? Are they going to take things underground? Are they going to kick out the IAEA permanently? Are they going to pull out of the NPT? We don't know the answer to these questions. And what's the public unrest going to be like? Can somebody emerge? Because you cannot have resistance without a movement led by, a figurehead of some kind. And this regime has been incredibly good in the last few days. They've executed 3 or 4 potential people who they think could emerge as
Well, I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah.
They killed 3 or 4 people.
About 3, I think. Three for sure. There's a 4th. I'm waiting to get confirmation. Yeah, people that they're afraid of, who could use this period of instability and dysregulation to foment rebellion and insurrection. It's the last thing they want.
And that's where I'm going to butt in here, and you're going to correct me if I'm wrong, but if we were in a different presidency and a different era, this is where the CIA would be in Iran and would be fomenting change, because that is ultimately what the American goal is.
Which is absolutely should not be doing, ever. It did it in 53.
But
and
I didn't say it should or shouldn't. I'm just saying it would have.
Meaning
not
should or shouldn't from a moral perspective. It just simply doesn't. It doesn't work. For this to have legitimacy for decades to come, it has to be organic, homegrown, free range. Grass-fed.
The agency can sometimes hide itself so dramatically that it's not even known it's there.
Iran is not.
We want your opinion.
Iran is, and again, I say this as a very proud Persian. Iran is different than I think other theaters of conflict where the CIA has operated. Iranian civilization and nationhood goes back thousands of years. It's very different. It does not take weld. It's not like Iraq, which is a fabricated state, didn't exist until 1917, 1918 after the Sykes-Picot Agreement, or, the modern Middle East is very different. So you want to meddle in the Middle East, fine, but Turkey, Egypt, Iran, these are nations that have existed for thousands of years. That's a game that the United States intelligence agencies, and I would add MI6, the UK, hasn't figured it out either.
Andrew, what do you think happens next in this region? Are we going to reach peace? Are they going to form an alliance with the US?
So I'm smart enough not to debate, because I am largely ignorant on the political divisions and internal politics of Iran. And I know that CIA has very little idea of what's going on in Iran most of the time also. And I am suspicious that a big part of why we went in at all was because Netanyahu and Israel said, here's the intelligence that we have. It's a very common game in the world of intelligence. If you have 80%, if you have 100% of knowledge, you're only going to share 20%. And you're going to share the 20% that benefits you.
Do you think that's potentially what happened?
I absolutely think that's what happened.
So you think Netanyahu and Israel could have given selective intelligence to the United States to provoke them to get involved?
That's it. It only makes sense. It's what a professional intelligence service would do. It's exactly what the United States does.
And you don't think the U.S. knows that, though? They're only getting titrated amounts of information?
No. I think even if they did know that, Netanyahu understands the Trump mentality of horse racing.
That's
right. And there's The world of intelligence is a nasty, nasty game. We call it a gentleman's game, but it's not at all. It's a game of twisting people's distortions and cognitive dissonance and playing into biases and politics, and it's a nasty, nasty game.
So what happens next?
What I think we need to be prepared for is that nuclear weapons are not becoming less likely to be used. I think the traditional World War II nuclear weapon, the ICBM that's targeting a civilian population, that is less likely to be used. That is possibly full-on unlikely to be used. But a dirty bomb?
What's that?
A dirty bomb being a 60% enriched uranium deposit that's triggered through some kind of explosive device that's dropped off in a car trunk or dropped off in a suitcase.
It doesn't have a weapon system.
But it
It's
just
not like an
radiates
engine.
the air.
You drive a truck in and you just explode because it's like a radioactive dirty bomb.
yeah.
It causes like a radiation cloud to hover above a city or a small area. Right. What about
That's what terrorists would have.
what about tactical nukes?
And tactical nukes, I think, are also something that we're very likely to see. Since the end of World War II, what we've seen is an increased investment, not in intercontinental ballistic missile warfare, but in tactical nuclear warfare. Tactical nuclear warfare are warheads that are as small as 50 pounds. And those can sit on the end of a short distance rocket, a medium range rocket. They can be put in a backpack and put on a drone for all intents and purposes. And those tactical nukes have a very small contained explosion, but it's still a nuclear explosion. And the reason that tactical nukes are so valuable is because now you can use them against military targets. So
I gotta take, like, can be used against, should never be said, right? So that's my line in the sand. Tactical nuclear weapons are no longer in the U.S. arsenal for precisely that reason, because they cannot be used, because the escalation to strategic nuclear weapons, which is one continent to the next, big systems, big delivery systems, is inevitable. But keep going.
You're saying it's a slippery slope.
It's not a slippery. It's a dividing line. You can't even enter into the slope. It's like if you get pushed off a cliff, there's no going back. It's not a slope, it's a cliff.
So you're
in my understanding of nuclear war games, and everyone at the Pentagon knows that, no matter how nuclear war begins, it ends in total annihilation, which is why America no longer has tactical nuclear weapons in its arsenal. We used to. We used to have small nukes that you could put in a backpack and jump out of an aircraft, and I know people who rehearsed that during the Cold War.
You can definitively say the U.S. has none in its arsenal,
We
or
do
none
not.
that we know of?
No, we don't. Now, you could say that the ones on bombers, because we have a certain kind of one nuclear weapon that is on that it can be flown in, and it can be its size can be dialed down, and that makes it tactical.
Why have we got nuclear bombs then at all if we can never use them?
That's the
Because
fundamental.
you're saying we can't have
deterrence.
tactical nuclear bombs because we would never use them, and if we did, the world's over, basically. So why do we have nuclear bombs? Because the same principle applies.
Because you have nuclear bombs. I
We
have
have
So
nuclear
we might as well
bombs.
have the tactical ones.
Absolutely no, and I do believe that's one of the wise moves of the U.S. nuclear command and control.
Because the tactical ones will lead to the big ones.
1,000%,
We're
not even
getting-
100%.
Yeah.
But if that's
1,000%.
true, then why have the big ones?
Well, that's the bigger question, but our position on why we have nuclear weapons is one word. It's called deterrence.
Yeah.
We are going to deter you from using your nuclear weapons against us because we have an arsenal and you have an arsenal. It's this bizarre catch-22 paradox of why we can't get rid of nuclear weapons.
We're now seeing where reality and policy butt heads. Because Annie's right, the policies on this are clear as mud, but they are stated and restated over and over again in order to get the American populace, the American people, to be able to stomach the fact that we have all these nuclear weapons, right? The fact that we put our nuclear weapons in 5 other countries around the world, right? Belgium is sitting there holding our nukes. Italy is holding our nukes.
Making them a target.
And giving them a nuclear weapon in their own border.
Which they
but we
can't
control.
use, which they cannot use without the President of the United States authorizing it. So
According
it's
to our-
very precarious.
But who would be able to use it if they wanted to?
So here's every weapon is different. Every weapon is different. And I say this because the truth of nuclear weapons is far scarier than the average person understands, which is a big part of why I believe, like you, they will never get used at a strategic level because the people who actually handle the weapons, the people that you're talking to, they understand the devastating consequences of these weapons, but the layperson gets very, very confused sometimes. So a small warhead, let's just say 30 kilotons of explosive power, right? Which is still twice what we dropped on Hiroshima. A small warhead does an immense amount of damage. It annihilates 10 square miles, let's say, of wherever it explodes, if it's a surface explosion. If it's an altitude explosion, it doesn't destroy really anything. It leaves an EMP footprint that short circuits wiring, right?
EMP.
And that can be a huge EMP. Thank you. An EMP pulse that destroys everything beneath it.
What is an EMP?
An EMP is an electromagnetic pulse. It's a electrical discharge that comes from a nuclear detonation or other sources that infiltrates through technology, wiring, et cetera, and it shorts it or burns out the wiring. So you
Think of like a massive surge, like a massive power surge, yeah.
Or you can detonate them underground, underwater to create natural effects. You can create earthquakes, you can create tsunamis, you can create vapor bubbles that are just destructive. So there's lots of different ways that you can use a weapon. But the thing that concerns me is that because the US policy is so black and white as it's fed to the American population, it's that much more inviting for one of these other countries to use a nuclear weapon in a specific way to create chaos, to create a lack of clear acquisition. For example, if a small Russian nuke, which lives in Belarus, because Russia puts their nukes in Belarus, finds its way into Kiev and explodes in the back of a truck, who do you blame? Does the U.S. blame Russia? Does the U.S. blame Belarus? Does Russia take responsibility for it? Does Europe say that it's an attack from the Russians? What do you say? Because now you just had a nuke go off and the world's confused. And the same thing happens if China uses a tactical nuke to destroy in the ocean, in the South China Seas. If China uses a tactical nuke to blow up 5 Filipino ships, what is that? It was a small nuclear device that was used in a littoral situation that was only attacking, military forces that were quote unquote violating some sort of free space. What do you do there? That's not when you launch ICBMs. So what do you do?
What happens there, Annie?
That's the nightmare situation. I mean, attribution, or rather non-attribution of a nuclear weapon.
Figuring out where it came from.
Yes, when you don't, because if a strategic nuclear weapon is launched, an ICBM, we, the United States, knows precisely where it came from because we see it from our satellite systems in space in the first second after launch. So that is the fundamental of deterrence. Not only can you not launch at us, but we will know in 1 second and we will be back at you before yours even get to us. That's how that works. But what Andrew is saying is deeply troubling. And another reason to our conversation about why Iran should not have the bomb, or anyone for that matter, it's dangerous enough that you have 9 nuclear-armed nations who could, as you say, someone in Belarus could wind up with something. That's incredibly dangerous, but you do not want anyone else into this mix.
Including non-state actors, which would be Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, if you're Israel. The concern is not so much that Iran will use it, but Iran will provide it to a non-state entity that is not bound by any international law or rules of warfare. And Iran can claim deniability.
And that's why President Trump bombed. That's why.
So imagine Israel is one of the 9.
Yeah.
One of the 9 nuclear capable countries. Imagine this Mossad that is absolutely capable of incurring across Iranian borders, smuggle in a 50-pound tactical nuke. And they take it and they put it inside one of the testing ranges, where they put it inside one of the facilities inside Iran. And then they put it on a timed detonator, and 13 hours later, it goes off. There's a nuclear explosion underground in Iran, in an Iranian facility. That we, in this simulation, we know it's triggered by Israeli covert action. But the whole world sees an explosion go off in Iran. So now the president wonders, did they just run a nuclear test? Iran raises their hand and say, we did not run a nuclear test. Somebody put a nuclear weapon in our territory. Who believes who, right? What does Saudi Arabia believe? Well, shit, Iran has nuclear capability. We're nuclear threshold. Boom, let's get it going. Japan, nuclear threshold. They start getting their program going.
How bad does it look for Iran if it admits that Israeli commandos or agents made their way into one of the most top secret facilities right under their nose?
Yes. Right. So I have a curiosity, which you might know.
You have some
possible theory.
Some sick curiosities. We should share a drink.
No, this is like a terrifying one. Is that after October 7th, President Biden went to Israel himself. He did not send Blinken. Remember that? Mm-hmm. This was in hours.
That was a big deal.
This is in hours. This was not a man who was, out playing football, okay? He goes to the heart of the battle zone. Why? My theory is that he said to Netanyahu, there's one line you may not cross. And if you cross it, we are not friends anymore, ever again. And that's the nuclear line. That is my theory. No one's whenever I've asked anyone, they just don't have an answer. Their lips get very pursed, and no one says anything, which leads me to believe that is precisely what happened.
There's so much going on around this map that sits in front of us it all seems to be happening at once with, Russia and Ukraine, and you've got China and with Taiwan. You've now got the Middle East going off with Iran and Israel and everything happening in Gaza. It doesn't feel like this is going to go the other way. It doesn't feel like this is going to retract anytime soon. It's funny because when Trump got elected, he promised to end these wars. And under his reign, it seems like there's more wars popping up. And actually, a lot of this causes cover and distraction for other people to start, invading countries that they've got a problem with. And we talked a little bit about international law being violated and new precedences being set in terms of what you can do. We're now at a point where it's kind of okay to bomb a sovereign country. It's kind of okay just to roll across the border and just take what you want. So I think that's where my concern starts. And I'm looking over at the other side of the map here with Russia and Ukraine, and I'm asking myself, how does that end? Putin can't just roll out of there, because then why did he ever roll in? I mean, it doesn't look like Ukraine are going to allow him to take a part of their country. That war's going to carry on. And then you've got China and Taiwan, where the tension has increased. And I think I read that there's been more murmurs of conflict or invasion going on with China in recent times, which would probably be a great time if you're China and you want to take Taiwan. Now would be a pretty good time to do it. Trump is busy.
Not just busy. There's a military test happening in Taiwan in the next few days where they're practicing or prepping for a amphibious invasion from the Chinese People's Liberation Army onto the coast of Taiwan. And so what has the Chinese government done in the last few days? They have jammed GPS signals. They have launched drones that are interfering with radar, basically, and blocking shipping lanes legally within where they can be. But the point being is that if you're Taiwan, you're prepping for this amphibious invasion that may not need to happen because China can do plenty to disrupt and make life for Taiwan miserable without even setting one soldier's foot on Taiwanese soil. So absolutely, this is, and meanwhile, the U.S. is busy elsewhere. Look at the missiles that were used to provide Israel, the THAAD missiles that were used to defend against Iranian ballistic missiles. It's been depleted, right? So if you're the U.S. now, you're at a weaker state of being able to defend Taiwan than you were a month ago, 6 months ago.
And there's also sort of a public fatigue, right? Because now the public in the United States, they're more polarized. There's, even on the right, there's some people that think we should be going to war. On the left, they think we shouldn't, et cetera. It's getting quite murky. There's a lot of backlash. And I'm sure Trump feels that. Some of his closest media allies like Tucker Carlson and half my Twitter feed are saying he shouldn't have dropped the bomb, he shouldn't go to war. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure that stuff gets to him. But Benjamin, you believe, I think, that if there were to be a trigger for World War III, it would come from that region.
I think so. I think we would see it in the form of what we're seeing now, trade war, supply chain crisis issues. We saw during COVID what happens when the supply chain is disrupted. That was a sort of a non-human event, meaning it was a virus. But imagine China now banning the sale of all rare earth minerals to the West, right? These are minerals that are used in the construction of lithium-ion batteries, microchips, processors, things of that nature. And then imagine if China says, look, we're simply not going to sell these things to the United States and its Western allies. Done. We're not going to. What happens then? So I think a major conflict will be precipitated by an economic and trade war, which we're now basically in for all intents and purposes. And until the US and Western allies can diversify by getting these resources elsewhere, I don't know if occupying Greenland is going to be the answer, or making Canada the 51st state will give us that. But this is where the Chinese are very effective. They have a large amount of these minerals within their borders. We know that there's a good amount in Ukraine, which is why President Trump wanted to make that deal with the Ukrainians to secure those mineral rights. But this all goes back to trade and technology. You don't need to control territory for territory's sake now. You need territory that has something that's vital, whether it's oil, less so these days, arguably, but now it's rare earth minerals and access to trade routes. That is where you start messing with that, you are then lighting the fuses of war.
Which are already being messed with. Everything that you just rattled off is already in motion. It's already happening. It's part of why I make the claim that World War III is already happening. If China invades Taiwan, if China takes Taiwan administratively, judiciously, militarily, however they choose to go in there, because we keep thinking that they're going to like send warships in and weaken the battlefield with missiles or something. That's not how they took Hong Kong. They took Hong Kong administratively and then just moved in the police after saying we have legal right. That's exactly what they're doing in Taiwan. They even have a parliament in Taiwan that's majoritively pro-China, right? So they meddled with the elections in January enough to win a majority in the parliament, even though they lost the presidency, right? So I actually, and I think we're seeing the same messaging coming out of Europe, if China moves on Taiwan, the world kind of does this, and Taiwan's alone. Not only because the president's distracted, but also because NATO is distracted, Europe is distracted. And the last thing anybody wants is to fight over there when there's so much bullshit happening over here.
But the thing is, they don't even need to move in and invade. All they have to do is block shipping routes,
Correct.
which they can do.
Yep.
No one's going to challenge them on that, and basically stop selling these rare earth minerals to every country that wants them. What do we do then? Russia's not selling us what it has. Russia can choose to do the same thing.
But that's not going to turn into a kinetic war. The United
It
States,
won't, right? It won't, exactly.
It'll turn into more of what we're already seeing.
Right.
More tariffs and more threats and more trade and more of the same stuff that we're already seeing, which is a big part of why I think we're already in the middle of
That
World
is
War
the,
III.
I agree. That is the war we're in right now. It just doesn't look like the wars of the past.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was Biden that said or suggested that if China were to invade or take Taiwan, then there would be a war. We'd be in a war.
But it doesn't need to. It doesn't need to. For China to win, it doesn't have to set foot on Taiwanese soil. All it has to do is basically isolate Taiwan economically, trade-wise, and then dare anybody else in the West or elsewhere to do anything about it.
Will they do anything about it?
That's really difficult to see.
Even France, even the president of France just came out recently and was like, if China takes Taiwan, I don't think France is going to get involved.
Yeah. If we in the West can find our minerals elsewhere, I think we'll throw Taiwan under the bus.
And under the Biden Chip Act, that's exactly what we're trying to do, is find our diversified routes.
Haven't we got some sworn promise to protect Taiwan?
Yes. Officially, yes. We have a sworn promise to protect Taiwan.
I think that the wild card in all of this is the current president. No one knows how he is going to behave. And I don't really believe that there's such a thing as him being distracted. I think that he will put his focus on whatever it is he chooses. And then that becomes the attraction.
Yeah.
If you love the Diary of a CEO brand and you watch this channel, please do me a huge favor. Become part of the 15% of the viewers on this channel that have hit the subscribe button. It helps us tremendously, and the bigger the channel gets, the bigger the guests.